He was a morbidly obese surgeon destined for an operating table and an early death. Now he's a rebel MD who is fabulously fit and fighting to make America healthy again. This is Stay Off My Operating Table with Dr. Philip Ovadia.
Welcome, folks. It is Stay Off My Operating Table with Dr. Philip Ovadia. We are joined today by somebody who is not going to talk over my head, I hope. And that isn't always the case for guests on this show. Carnivore JT. Phil, why is this dude here?
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. You know, social media can certainly be a blessing and a curse. And the carnivore world has attracted all sorts of people that are out there. And quite frankly, sometimes you don't know what you're getting into. And over, now I guess I would say the years that I've been following JT, he is one of the more informative and entertaining. And those two things don't always go together. I was lucky enough, honored to do a thing on his platform a while back, and really wanted to get him on here to bring his perspective on carnivore to the audience here, which I think he has some unique things and is really, like I said, putting a lot of great information out there to help people that are exploring this carnivore diet and lifestyle. With that, I'll let JT introduce himself, maybe talk about how you got into carnivore and how you got into the social media side of things to start with.
Yeah, part of, I think, what makes me be able to be relatable is, and the reason I pick on a certain group of people a lot, was a self-proclaimed Seco bro. For anybody out there, calories in, calories out. And I like to make fun of people of that all the time. I played high school sports. I played college baseball. I have a degree in sports medicine. I got out and was coaching Division I baseball, dabbled in strength and conditioning, got into the fitness industry, was a personal trainer, was a manager, like the typical, did amateur bodybuilding, your typical in shape 20-something with enough knowledge to be dangerous. And I truly believed that everything boiled down to simple thermodynamics. And the root cause of everything was that people ate too much and moved too little. And I couldn't fathom any other way, because that's exactly what happened for me. When I started eating less and started moving more, guess what? I dropped weight. Shocker. And I could do almost like to a T, right? I could write out the math equation. I could, predict where I was going to be. I had it down, which now I realize the healthier you are, the easier that is. And as a very athletic, metabolically healthy, low body fat 20-something, it's pretty easy, right? Like it's just, I can do whatever I want. I can party on the weekends and I can maintain my health.
I can confirm. I wasn't that level of athlete, but yes, all through my 20s and into my mid-30s.
Yeah, so you get a skewed idea.
Eat anything, anytime, as much as I wanted, and I was probably walking around at a natural low double digits, maybe even high single digits body fat, and I thought it was because I was, I had it figured out.
Exactly. Like I was born with abs. That is my genetic gift. And then I hit my 30s and I got married and I had kids and I started working 60 hours a week, and all of a sudden I got dad bod. I was like, what is happening? And part of it I knew, like in the back of my head, I was like, I'll get around to getting in shape. When I get off work at 9:00 at night, am I going to go to the gym, or am I going to go try and catch the last 5 minutes of my newborn going to bed? So in my head, I justified why I was getting out of shape. And then I was like, all right, I moved. I'm going to start over. I'm going to start working out. And I went back to my old tricks, and I clean, right? Like anytime I would diet clean. And so I did a variation of Whole30, and I did it for 90 days, and I lost weight, but I didn't feel better at all. And I got upset. Like for 90 days, I was strict. I worked out all the time. I didn't have junk food. I didn't have even the smallest snacks. I didn't have alcohol, nothing. I ate lean meats. I had high vegetables, like as much as I could stomach, fruit, all the carb sources that you're supposed to. And I'm like, man, like I was like mad. I was like, I feel borderline worse. And so then I put all the weight back on in a month and a half. And then I finally hit a point where I was like, you know what? I don't like this. I'm 20-ish pounds overweight. For me, I'm 25 pounds overweight. I got to figure it out. And I started with Saladino, and my wife sent me some of his stuff. And I think I say this on every podcast I'm on. As much as people want to hate on Saladino, and as much as like he might have some slightly kooky ideas, he got the word out to a lot of people that got them started. And so I started animal-based and instantly felt better. And I was like within days, like my digestion was better, my bloating was better. Like I started sleeping better. And I was like, there might be something to this. You're telling me I can eat fatty red meat and fruit and I'm good? And then I just had a natural progression, and I felt great. I felt great on animal-based. I think animal-based is great. I have no problem with animal-based. But I found when I just went that final step and cut the fruit out, that I was just even better. And I think, that's kind of how I landed on strict carnivore. And I experiment around, and every time I come back to it, because just how I feel and the things that I've been able to get rid of on carnivore just aren't matched with any other diet.
So what things have you gotten rid of on carnivore?
So I had lifelong eczema, mostly on my hands. And I did an experiment where I ate a standard American diet for 3 weeks, and my eczema blew up out of control, like weeping eczema, like fluid oozing out of the back of my hands. I have a before and after, and it looks terrible. It looks like I stuck my hand in a meat grinder. So yeah, I can't count how many prescriptions I've had for eczema that never did anything. And it started when I was young, like 12, 13 years old, right? Like stuff bag bomb and put the gloves on and go to sleep.
Yeah.
Found out I'm allergic to bag bomb. I itched my hands raw in the middle of the night.
Oh.
So just like stuff like that. And it's just been under control. It still gets dry, especially, when we get into the winters and it's a little bit colder and it's such a dry climate. I had like psoriasis spots like on my knees that had just been there for years that went away. I always had acne on like my hairlines. That went away. I played sports and had a lot of injuries. I had 4 surgeries by the time I was done with my playing career, and just chronic inflammation. Like have half my meniscus gone in both knees, just not having aches and pains in my knees, like not having aches and pains in my shoulders, headaches. I had neck issues that caused a lot of headaches that has alleviated pretty significantly. So nothing super major, but just stuff that you convince yourself.
I think anybody who's dealt with any of those things for an extended period of time would take
pretty
issue with
major
that.
to me.
Yeah, that's pretty doggone significant.
I think you start to realize that it's not normal, right? Like I'm now 38, so I'm in my mid 30s, and I just, I've had aches and pains since I was in my 20s, right? Like I remember being done with a double header over the weekend and rolling out of bed on a Monday, just feeling like you got ran over by a bus. And that's just normal, right? That's the price you pay for athletics, right? And so I always chalked it up to that. And everybody's, oh yeah, you get older and you have aches and pains. And since going carnivore, I'm like, no, like I feel better than when I was 21. Like I don't hurt when I get out of bed in the morning, which is pretty remarkable given what I have put my body through over the years.
Yeah.
Okay, Phil, talk about it from the medical standpoint. Why the heck is JT feeling better?
It's stuff that I hear every day, and just, this chronic inflammation that most people walk around with and don't realize, because it is so common and because everyone else around them is experiencing the same. And you're right, we just accept it as it just happens. But I think more and more what we're seeing now with people in this community is, no, it doesn't just happen. And, you can fix this and you can improve. And, the number of times I hear that, right? I feel better than I did 20 years ago. It just never ceases to amaze me. I mean, personally, I've experienced the same thing. And, we've, as a society, been fooled into thinking that all of this stuff is normal. And the reality is it's not. And as I've said many times on this, on this podcast, right, we're really in the business of giving hope, giving people hope, because you can get better, you can heal. And that's really the message that we're looking to spread. So I'd love to now hear, okay, you start doing carnivore, you get great results like so many other people. And then what made you decide to start talking about this, to get on social media and start putting, your journey out there?
Oh man, part of it was I needed something to direct my attention. So when we moved from Washington State, I quit my job and decided to stay home with the kids just because childcare is expensive. And I was like, I'm just working I was in sales, and the hours that you have to put in and, starting from the bottom is just too much. So I'm like, all right, I need something going. And I did like crypto before, but crypto's super volatile. I had to find a different avenue. And it was about after 4 to 6 months of doing animal based that I'm like, man, I got to get on and start at least doing something. And I originally didn't really plan on, being a huge advocate. I was like faceless for the first few months. And then I realized that a lot of people were dogging on carnivore and saying that it was just for a bunch of people who were fat and out of shape and sick. I was like, oh, like there's actually quite a few like healthy people on carnivore that don't need to do carnivore necessarily. There's the group of people like the Michaela Petersons that do it as a way to survive. Like without a carnivore type diet, Michaela Peterson probably wouldn't be here. That there are the people like that. And I realized that was a common theme. Everybody thought that's the only reason anybody would do carnivore. So I'm like, no, like there's some of us that are just do it because we feel better. So I got into it, and then I started, doing some cooking stuff. And then I finally realized that I was not burdened with any type of medical association that was overhanging me. I didn't have to mind my P's and Q's and, cross my T's and dot my I's because I'm not a doctor. And I was like, but that doesn't mean I can't like start presenting some sort of, medical type stuff. And honestly, like my channel kind of turned to the way it is now when I had discovered the European Atherosclerosis Society consensus statement on LDL and the conflict of interest statement on that paper. And I was like, this is a little weird, but I'm sure everybody knows that. And 6 months went by, and I was like, I don't think anybody knows this. So I'm going to do a video on it. And for anybody who has not seen that, it is one of the most cited papers out there as far as LDL causing atherosclerosis. And the consensus panel, normally you go to the bottom of a paper and the conflict of interest statement is a paragraph, right? Hey, this guy got paid lunch to fly out and do a conference. It is like 600 words long. And I was like, what? And there are like 7 statin manufacturers, statin or, lipid lowering manufacturers that are listed over 100 times individually. And I was like, I feel like this is a little bit of a problem. And it wasn't, we did this. It was, they're on a board of directors. They've gotten research grants. They're consulting. This entire, this is the established medical consensus, right? As the infamous Dr. Allo would say, every cardiologist who has ever lived agrees that LDL causes atherosclerosis. And this is why. And they have the nice charts, and they have the randomization trials, and they have, everybody cites this paper that LDL is the cause of heart disease. And I'm like, what if it's not? Because in this consensus statement, they recommend that you use lipid lowering therapy in order to reduce heart disease. And I'm like, so what you're saying is the people that are being paid by the people that make the drugs are recommending the drugs made by the people that are paying them. Do we not see this as a problem? And so that video went crazy. And then I realized that 99.9% of people don't have any ability to read a study, which you don't even need a ton of medical background. You just need to be able, honestly, half the time you have to be able to find the full text, right? Like most people can't find a full text, so they just read the abstract. And we assume that a scientist is going to be truthful in their abstract, right? Hey, this is what we found and this is what it means. And then I realized that most of it is, right, like go pull up a paper on red meat and colon cancer. Red meat causes colon cancer. And then you read it and they're like, well, based on this, the epidemiological study, you can't prove a causation and you shouldn't really worry about the risk factor because there's so many confounding variables. But in our abstract, we says it raises it by, 19% for every serving that you eat. And so then I realized that people just cite this stuff and nobody in the carnivore community knew how to overcome that. They're like, what do I say when somebody says red meat causes colon cancer or red meat causes heart disease or red meat causes diabetes or, on and on. And I was like, well, you tell them it's a crap study. That's all. And I don't have to, I can say whatever I want because I'm not a doctor. And
There
I was
you
like,
go.
because originally I didn't do that stuff because I wasn't a doctor. I was like, who's going to take me seriously? I was like, oh yeah, I'm not a doctor, so I can say whatever I want. And so then that's kind of how it turned in. And I just realized that the more research that I looked, the more papers that I looked, the less science is actually settled. And it's not. And Dr. Ovadia, I use your example of getting out of your residency all the time, where you said you want to go into cardiac surgeon. And they said, no, it's a dead field. We've solved heart disease. Don't do that. Like, you're not going to have a job in 10 years. And now we don't have enough cardiac surgeons for the amount of people that need cardiac surgery.
Do you have a
Yeah.
favorite? I'm sorry. Do you have another favorite, everybody says story that when you read the cited paper, you realized it was basically the same story? The employees were paid to tout the product and they did a good job of touting the product.
The American Beverage Association saying that artificial sweeteners were healthy was a good one, which is also funny because the more you look into it, and this is where I feel like you just have to have a little common sense to know how like money works. Obviously, these people are in it for money, right? Like, you don't get to $1 trillion industries without being in it for money. And, so I saw that paper and then I looked more into the American Beverage Association, and there was a study that came out about adolescents and sweetened beverages. And the American Beverage Association released a statement trying to shred this study, right? They're like, oh, it's an epidemiological study, can't prove causation. It doesn't mean that kids are having medical issues by drinking sugary drinks, right? You can't look at it that way. And then a year later, they came out with this campaign that we're going to make everybody healthier by getting them to drink artificially sweetened beverages, right? Now, this is the healthy one, right? And so then they fund some studies, and then, go down to the bottom of the study and it says funded by the American Beverage Association. They're paying influencers to present information that aspartame specifically is healthy or does not have negative, health or adverse effects. And so then you start looking into it, and you almost feel like a conspiracy theorist at some point, just the money trails, right? You realize that the governing body of dietitians that certifies dietitians owns stock in Pepsi and has quid pro quos with Nestle. And you're like, how does this, like, how can we go and tell the general public that you should be doing this when everybody has their hand in everybody's pockets and it doesn't benefit us whatsoever?
Yeah, and people really don't realize what a house of cards this is. And the whole sort of mantra, right, about trusting the science. And people don't realize that for the past, I believe it was the mid 1980s when this really changed, that the majority of research became funded by industry. Prior to that, it was funded by, majority government sources. Right. And there wasn't this push to make a product, right, to promote a product essentially with your research. And, that shifted in the 1980s. And really, the vast majority of the science since the 1980s has been funded by the industries. And we can't, get past what a bias that puts in. And, it's not necessarily that they might be, although this does happen, right, that they manipulate the data or manipulate the study. But just a simple fact that if, a manufacturer is paying for a study to be done and the study comes out, against that product, it just won't get published. So it won't make it into the literature. And therefore, we just have this, biased literature. And so when everyone says trust the science, and it's no, we really can't trust the science. And doctors are as guilty of this as anyone. I laughed before when you mentioned about only reading the abstract. I can tell you that, 99% of the practicing doctors out there, they only read the abstract. They only have time to read the abstract. And, they have that same sort of naivety in mind that the abstract is going to give them the truth about what's actually in the study. And I find the same thing you do. When you go and you actually read the study, it's amazing how different, the abstract. And then we have the compounded problem, right, of then the media gets a hold of the abstract and they want to put the headline, right? And you're just like, no, this study has nothing to do with what the headline says. And so it's just amazing the situation we find ourselves in. And, there are so many examples of it, but it's great that you're able to kind of do this and, make it understandable and make it accessible to so many more people. I'd love to kind of go into one of the things I love that you do are these self-experiments, and you've done some crazy ones. Maybe talk about, you mentioned the one earlier where you basically forced yourself to eat a standard American diet. Talk about maybe what that one was like and what some of the other sort of favorite experiments that you've done have been.
Yeah. So the first one I did was a carnivore overeating experiment. And that was right when I was starting to question how important calories were. And so it's a really tough topic because everybody is so ingrained in thermodynamics, right? Oh, you can't break thermodynamics. I'm like, nobody's saying you're breaking thermodynamics. We're not just destroying energy. But going into this, I was like, I truly believe that if I eat carnivore, it will be almost impossible for me to gain any significant amount of weight, regardless of my caloric intake. Now, that can be explained by a whole bunch of processes on the back end that still balance out the equation, whatever. I was like, I don't think it's going to happen. It could be my genetics, it could be metabolic health, whatever it is. I don't think I will be able to eat enough in order to. And I was like, 4,000 calories. And I'm going to do it based on math, right? So I calculated out my BMR. I calculated out my total daily energy expenditure. I calculated out how far over I was going to be eating, how much weight I should gain if it was as simple as these are the numbers and that's what happens. And it was really difficult to eat that much. There were often times where I would just melt butter and mix it with protein powder and drink it like just to get my calories in. And I ended up losing weight. And as I talked about it, I was like, part of it can be explained by I was a little loose with my diet before. So I lost some water, which I lost in the first, week, and then it maintained. But then I lost a couple pounds between weeks 2 and 3. I was like, how much I ate, how little I actually exercise, right? I work out, but I'm at home. I get less than 5,000 steps a day. I'm not doing any crazy cardio. I was like, that's crazy. And so then I was like, now I have to do that with a standard American diet, try to equate for the thermic effect of food and see what happens. And of course, I gained a whole bunch of water weight, and then I leveled off and gained like a little bit, not nearly as much as I thought I would, but one side I dropped and the other side I gained. And I also had a ton of other problems. Like I started not sleeping as well. I had the really bad eczema reactions. I started to get acne again. It was messing with me mentally. Like psychologically, I was like, man, I don't feel good. And I know it's because of the food I am making myself eat. And that would like irritate me. So then I was like, I'm getting like irritable. And I was like, man, this really sucks. And I'm eating Twinkies and, just terrible food that's supposed to be good. And I also realized how easy it was to eat it. And there was one day where I had not input my food, but I was like keeping track. And I was like, all right, I'm probably pretty close to my 4,000 calories. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I input everything and I realized I'd hit 5,000 already. And I was like, geez. And by the time I got done with it, I don't fast. Like I do some intermittent fasting, but I don't fast. I didn't eat for 30 hours because I was like grossed out by food. I was like, I just don't want to eat. I'm just not going to eat right now. And so I did another one about 6 months later, a little bit more controlled with the carnivore. And the same thing, I hit about 4,500 calories and was not gaining weight. Like I was just steady. I was steady at 3,000 calories. I was steady at 35. I was steady at 4. I was steady at 45. And then I finally hit the point I was like, I just can't eat anymore. Like I'm tired of eating. And so what I realized was we're so focused on caloric intake, right? Like just get your calories, just eat in a calorie deficit. I mean, we need to be focused on the type of food that we're eating, because if I eat carnivore, I have this huge range that I can go within, low or high, and still maintain, what I consider like a homeostasis body weight. And that's not it for everybody. There are some people that are like, how do you not gain weight? I'm like, part of it is I'm very insulin sensitive. I have low insulin. I have good blood sugar, right? Like that is a huge part of it. But if it was really as simple as just the total number of calories that you eat, I should be going like a yo on how much weight I'm gaining and not gaining. And so that kind of spurred into the calories in, calories out, calorie deficit, trying to bring nuance to it, because that's what people tell them, right? Just eat fewer calories. You got to go into a calorie deficit. You got to cut your calories. As long as it hits your calories, doesn't matter what you eat. And so I felt that needed to be challenged, because obviously it's not working, right? Everybody knows that's been since the 80s. Eat in moderation, eat less, move more, right? Watch your weight, lower your calories, and we just get fatter and fatter.
How does that work, Phil? How can he eat?
And again,
What's going on?
Yeah, the problem with the calorie in, calorie out model, right? JT said it's not that thermodynamics break, it's that we don't have the capacity really to, measure and, both sides of the equation. And on the calorie outside of things, we have this misconception that, you can plug your body weight and, some other factors into an equation and you can figure out how many calories you're burning. And, that just doesn't work in the end. And there's an impact of, JT used the fancy word, the thermogenic effect of food, that when you eat certain foods, it actually causes your body to burn more energy digesting that food. And then the eventual sort of breakdown products of that food, a calorie isn't a calorie is what it comes down to. And, again, it's one of these misconceptions, largely pushed by the food industry, by the way, that a calorie is a calorie. And it doesn't matter whether it's, broccoli, steak, or candy, as long as the calories are the same, you're eating the same. And so that's why, these experiments that, JT does are demonstrative and informative, and it helps to kind of break this narrative.
Do you have a favorite fan mail? Something that you go back to and go, oh, wow, this one was really cool.
Yeah, I had one. I'm not a super emotional person, but I got a Instagram message from a guy. I'd just done a video on how to get started on carnivore. And this is when I was pretty new getting my page going. And I showed, buying Kroger ground beef, from Fry's, chuck roast, the 5 dozen pack of eggs from Costco. And he messaged me and he goes, I'm really thankful that you did that because I'm on a permanent disability and a fixed income. And sometimes I feel like I'm not doing enough because all I can afford is Kroger ground beef and Kroger eggs. And I was like, man, like that sucks that you feel like you are not doing enough or you're inadequate in your attempt to be healthy because, other influencers out there are saying you need to eat organic, grass-fed, regenerative farm, all that kind of stuff. And then I started talking to him and he sent me his like before and after. And this is, I believe it's MS is what he has. He's in a wheelchair. He's permanently disabled. And he doesn't have a weight because he didn't weigh himself. But the before and after he sent me, he literally lost 2 people. Like he went from, just judging it 350 pounds to 180, like literally lost half of his weight as someone that's bound to a wheelchair. And I was like that hit me. And I'm like, man, and this guy, I was like, dude, you literally saved your own life. And you feel like you're not doing enough because you can't buy the best meat. And that I appreciate that Baker has come out and said that. Sean Baker has come out and said, the difference between grain-fed and grass-fed is not that big. And you are infinitely healthier eating grain-fed than not eating it at all.
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. Eat the best that you can. But that, like I shared that story and that went pretty crazy on Twitter. And one of my favorites was perfection is the enemy of good. And just because you can't eat, you can't afford, like I don't buy regenerative farm. Like that stuff's expensive. I can't justify spending $40 a pound on a steak. That's just, I can't compute. I try to get grass fed. There's some local farms that I can get decent prices on grass fed that I try. But at the end of the day, like you have to be able to make it fit. And even the beef that you get at your local supermarket is infinitely better than not doing it at all.
And a bag of Doritos and a loaf of Wonder Bread.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and definitely, something I say often as well. And even, full disclosure, as someone who is a part owner of a meat company that sells grass-fed regenerative beef, I still tell people I'd rather you eat the cheap beef, than anything else, right? The processed food or whatever. Another great message that you're helping to spread. You've been, I think, doing your thing on social media, probably 2-ish years now.
Just hit 2 years. Yeah, I hit 2
I lose
years a
track
couple
of
weeks
time,
ago.
but it seems like, I guess what's your takeaway been on how things have changed? Do you feel like, Carnivore is making headway, and the reactions that you get, have you seen a change in them over that time?
Huge. And the reason I say that is because very large accounts are becoming very enamored with carnivore influencers. And I feel like that was a little bit in the beginning. And it was like Paul Saladino and Liver King, right? Like people like to equate Liver King with carnivore. But they didn't care about anybody else. Like I'll call them lower level influencers. They're like, yeah, whatever. That's how you know that you're not really gaining headway. People just don't pay you any mind. I have very large accounts that are very familiar with my work, right? Like I have, people with millions of followers doing response videos or, trying to call me out or stuff like that. And I'm like, I'm not even that big of an account, right? Like I have, 160 on Instagram, but in the grand scheme of things, that's not that big. And so and then you started getting people writing articles about carnivore influencers. And then there's more and more of those. And then I really knew that carnivore was starting to make headway when that case report came out in the Journal of American Medical Association about, I'm going to butcher the diagnosis, the yellow nodules in his hands. A complete sham report. Like, this is the information. Yeah, the dude's in his 40s. He said man down.
I've
You
got
know,
I've got the door open at
You
both
blew
ends
the
of the
walls
office.
it's been windy out here.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have a man. This is the information. A man in his 40s came in, said he was eating carnivore, was eating 6 to 9 pounds of butter, cheese with his hamburgers, and his LDL went from 2 something to over 1,000. That's it. But he said he felt great and he had more energy and he lost weight. And the media ran with it like crazy. Like, just type in, and I showed how the media can like portray information, because there was also a vaccine study that came out like the next day that you could not find on Google. But if you typed in yellow carnivore, you would have pages of news articles, right? Headline. And I'm like, okay, that's when you know that people think they're taking notice. All that has to happen is one influencer has to have some sort of negative thing happen, and it'll be plastered over. And this was like some random dude, and you have accounts, major accounts doing it. And, Simon Hill was out there, retweeting this. I'm like, come on, even if you're anti-carnivore, you can't be promoting this. Like, you have to know that this is the most weakest evidence, like, ever, especially considering the condition. 50% of people have normal cholesterol levels. So you can't say that carnivore is like the driving force behind this, because some random person with 100 LDL could have this. So what are we doing here? And, so that was obviously recent, but it is definitely an uptick in terms of the exposure and the traction that carnivore is gaining.
The old saying about, first they ignore you and then they call you crazy and attack you and then you win. And I think we're in stage 2 there and headed to stage 3.
You gotten any of the kinds of messages that are along the lines of, a nice business you got there, shame for something to happen to it?
Oh, I've gotten death threats. And it is mostly on TikTok. I hate TikTok. My TikTok was kind of fledgling and I didn't care about it. And I was like, if TikTok goes away, I don't care. And then I had 4 TikTok accounts with about 1 million followers each do a video on one of mine, and my TikTok blew up. And so I have it, but I get the worst messages on TikTok. The number of people, and this was over, are you familiar with the carnivore bar? So the carnivore, it's pemmican, right? I love what they're doing. They use regenerative grass-fed beef, tallow. It's expensive, but that's what it was all based on. I did a video like defending it from someone who trashed it. And I was getting literally people telling me to go kill myself. People were finding my business. So I have an LLC that's attached to this. They were finding my business email and emailing me, telling me I should just do ungodly things to myself. And I'm like, what is wrong with you people? And that's the other way I know when you talk about then we win is large influencers will send their followers onto our pages. You can ask Nick Norwitz how that's going for him right now.
Yep.
Because the exact same thing happened to me with the exact same person.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. He does not like me at all. And what will happen is they just start flooding your page, and then they just call you names and they attack you and they threaten you and they send you messages. And it's just, at first, it's a little overwhelming. You're like, it makes you feel like bad inside. You're like, I got some random person that's never met me, has no idea about who I am, threatening me. And then you're like, man, these people are sad. That's just sad to just do that to a random person. And then it just brushes off. Like, yeah, I get quite a bit. It goes in waves. Luckily, their attention span is about this big. So it lasts for about 3 days and then it goes away until somebody else does a video, and then it comes back and then it goes away. But yes, that is not an uncommon occurrence.
Lordy. All right. So what's ahead? What's coming up?
Oh, I actually have a couple things, a couple that I can't quite talk about. I will be talking to you, Dr. Ovadia, about this as this goes. I will have you back on my podcast for a more specific interview. I just think just getting carnivore out there, getting it mainstream. I think it's definitely starting. There are a ton of people who want more information. And so I think bringing available information to people, because that part is still small. You go on, Amazon and look for carnivore information. It's still pretty small. You have the main ones. You have Baker's book. You have Saladino's book. Judy Cho has like a carnivore cure. And then you have some keto, low carb. There's still a ton of people that are like, wait, what do I do? How do I do this? What am I supposed to be doing? And so I think compiling information and getting it out to people where it's, mass available, like your book, the Stay Off My Operating Table. But a lot of people don't know that's applicable to carnivore because it's not necessarily a carnivore-based low-carb book. And so, Dr. Bickman's book, Why We Get Sick, I think is another great one. But on the surface, most people don't know that is very applicable to a carnivore, low-carb keto. So I think that's the direction right now is you now have all this interest. You have these Google searches. Look at Google Trends, like the carnivore diet Google searches is going crazy. Now it's like getting information to the masses so then they can then take it and at least have some idea of where to go to get more information, because it's still tough, right? There's not a ton of studies out there. You have to sift through a lot of stuff. You type in carnivore diet and you're going to get mostly negative stuff. So for the average person I've heard of carnivore, what do I do? They come to influencers, and there's only so many people that we can respond to. So I think getting that mass amount of information, I think, is next.
Yeah, talk a little bit along those lines about the recipes, the cooking videos, the cookbook. I think that's a great resource that people need to know about.
Yeah, so that's how I got started, was doing recipe videos, because people were just like, carnivore's too bland, right? Like it's too restrictive. I was like, all you gotta do is make a few tweaks, right? Add a couple seasonings every once in a while, animal-based every once in a while. There's some things that you can do to mix it up a little bit. And I came out with my digital cookbook, which I think has been a huge help for a lot of people, because people just feel like they get stuck, right? I can eat the same thing every day. I can eat ground beef and bacon and, steak and all that every single day and not have a problem. But some people definitely start to struggle with that. And so there's, Courtney and Luna came out with an in-print cookbook, which is fantastic. Victory Belt Publishing, they're doing a lot of things in the low carb, keto, carnivore space. So it's definitely getting out there. And I think the information is there. People just have a hard time finding it sometimes. Just getting more and more people access to the information, I think, definitely puts us on the right track.
That's interesting that you characterize it that way, the lack of information. I've been immersed in this with Dr. Ovadia now for 3.5 years, and I'm regularly surprised by people who I met with my business partners, 70 of us all in a room this last week. And I was struck by the fact that so many people are still completely oblivious to all the things that we eat that aren't good for us. And it reminded me that not everybody talks about and thinks about metabolic health several days a week for several hours a day. So it's fun to see that you're gaining a following with this kind of message. I went and stalked you just a little bit just to see who I was fixing to talk to. And I got a kick out of one of you. There's a video with some girl disparaging a bowl of hamburger. And you could eat a bowl of it, this 8 ounces of hamburger or a pound of sweet potato. And here's how much better you'd be. I got a kick out of it. I really did. But I realized, on the other hand, there's an awful lot of people who would argue that you're hurting yourself if all you're eating is the most nutrient-dense food on the planet.
It's so easy. I don't even know if I can call it manipulate, because there is data out there to support it. but it's so easy to twist a narrative. And so one video that I did that gained a lot of traction, and I'm going to forget his name. He's a very famous vegan cardiologist. His son is big into social media. And he came on and said, what has more protein per calorie, broccoli or beef? And I've heard this argument before. Technically, broccoli does. But that's only if you do it per...
Has more protein per calorie. Oh
per calorie.
That's a
So I was like, I'm going to go buy some broccoli and show you just what this looks like. And so I had a 10-ounce steak. I was like, here's a 10-ounce steak, 50 grams of protein. Here's 10 ounces of broccoli, 8 grams of protein. Here's how much broccoli you would need to get the same amount of protein. And it was like almost 5 pounds of broccoli. But I've heard that argument so many times from vegans. And they're like, oh, it's by calorie. Just do it by calorie. Are you eating, that's only 50 grams of protein, right? Are you eating 15 pounds of broccoli a day for your protein needs? No, then why are we doing it based on calories? And then in the same breath, like that same woman, I did a video on it because she used a study posted by Michael Greger, which I call Dr. Sarcopenia, because he posted, so this is why it's good to not be a doctor. I can do whatever I want. I can call people whatever I want. I don't have to worry about any board getting mad at me. He posted a study and it said eggs, if you eat 1 egg a day, you're at an 81% increased risk of diabetes. That's a real study. And I'm like who in their right mind goes, yep, 1 egg, 81%. I'm definitely getting diabetes from this. Come on, like we have to have some common sense. So I actually did a video today where people are talking about cherry picking. I was like, well, unfortunately, you have to cherry pick in order to do nutrition, period. So I was like, here you go. This study says that diabetes raises your risk, or eggs raise your risk of diabetes by 55%. This study says eggs lower your risk of diabetes by 40%. This study says meat causes heart disease. This study says meat does not cause heart disease. What are we supposed to do? I can literally find studies that are so polar opposite. And you're like, what do you do? There was just the study that came out that said red meat consumption raises your risk of dementia. Okay, I can find a study that says red meat actually lowers it. And furthermore, a ketogenic diet lowers your risk of dementia, specifically beta hydroxybutyrate. So if I'm eating a bunch of meat, I raise my risk. But then if I'm in ketosis while eating that meat, I lower my risk. So what on earth am I supposed to believe? There's such a problem with the data that's out there. And yeah, everybody has to cherry pick, because if you presented all of the data, people would go, am I getting diabetes or am I not getting diabetes from eggs? Because you said both things. What are we talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, and I think ultimately, for most people, you have to start paying attention to the results that you get. And what I tell people, over and over again is, I can't tell you that carnivore is the right diet for you, but give it a try. I'm very confident now in saying it's not going to kill you, despite what your cardiologist might say. It's not going to kill you. Give it a try, see what results you get. And are you happy with the results you're getting from your current diet, right? These are sort of the basic questions that people need to be asking. And, I think that's what is going to lead more and more people to a better place. Just, again, amazing the work that you're doing. Great to see, that the audience is growing and the attention it's getting. And yeah, sometimes I am jealous of the stuff that you can say that I can't quite say as liberally. I maybe have to say it in a little bit more nuanced way, but
So I have a funny story about that.
Yeah.
Nick Norwitz is one of my favorite people in the space. He's doing amazing work for low carb, just alternative views to nutrition. I've talked to Nick on Twitter for well over a year. Like, we have consistently corresponded back and forth. And this is when I realized that I had the ability to say stuff that other people did not. So for any of your listeners that don't know Nick, was a valedictorian at Dartmouth in cell biology, a PhD at Oxford in metabolism. and is finishing up his MD at Harvard. He's like months away from graduating. But
He's educated.
Very educated. Since he's in the MD program at Harvard, there were a few things that he had to be careful of. I am neither going to confirm nor deny that several posts that I have made over my time in Twitter were created by somebody other than me that I posted because I can. And so that's when I realized that I can post some stuff that other people who have to worry about, careers aren't able to post. And so I'm like, I can just get all of my information. None of this information's mine, right? I just go find a whole bunch of people that are smarter than me, figure out their information, and then I share it. And yeah, it's funny that you say that because yes, it has happened a few times.
Very good. This is an easy one on where people can find you.
Carnivore JT.
Yeah, and you're on all the platforms, and like I said, highly entertaining and informative. Definitely encourage people to check it out. And it's been great having to have this conversation with you, and I look forward to more in the future.
I appreciate you having me on.
Now, if I'm correct, there's also a website that we should tell folks about.
Yes, theinnercarnivore.com. That is also the name of my podcast, which Dr. Ovadia referenced earlier.
Theinnercarnivore.com and Carnivore
Yes, sir.
JT at all the places. Go listen to somebody who doesn't have to worry about a licensing board or a bunch of corporations that are trying to sell you stuff to make you sicker. Somebody who's actually doing the work himself and testing on himself. I love that bit. All right, this has been Stay Off My Operating Table with Dr. Philip Ovadia. Our guest has been Carnivore JT. Thanks for joining us. All the contact information is in the show notes, and we will talk to you next time.
Chances are you wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you didn't need to change your life and get healthier. So take action right now. Book a call with Dr. Ovadia's team. One small step in the right direction is all it takes to get started. Contact us at ifixhearts.com/talk. That's ifixhearts.com/talk.